Hello and welcome, I'm Tim and this is TimBatSea. And Luke is running the boat right now so we can do an old school video. I can talk to you. Anyway, we're coming over here and putting this barge alongside this ship, and they're waiting for some people on the ship to catch a line for us. But in the meantime, I can tell you we are not on our regular boat. Our regular boat is actually getting top end work done. And that means that like they replace the upper end of the engines. So like in our case it would be like 32 heads, because there's 32 cylinders to 16 cylinder engines, and they do a bunch of other stuff too. They do heat exchangers and whatever it needs, but they used to do that on hours, but they're changing it, and I don't know if it's already done, but I just knew that it was coming down the line, that instead of doing it in so many hours, they're starting to track, because all the engines are computer controlled. There's a log of how much fuel they burn, and so it's much more accurate to track, to do preventative maintenance on on fuel burn instead of hours. Because if you run slow and or a light tug, you're not putting the same stresses on the engines that you would pushing a loaded barge hooked up all the time, and that would obviously show in the amount of fuel that you burn. So I thought that was kind of cool, and we are just, our boat is in Philadelphia doing that, and while that's happening, our crew is on a boat that's kind of a loaner boat for us, and it's a much newer build. I should go back and say that our company has been really cool. One of the cool things, there's a million great things about our company, but one of the things is that we have a lot of really good equipment. They have attention to safety, and in order to do that, they have a lot of newer equipment. And when I say newer equipment, you should know that it's not uncommon for a lot of tugboats to be 30, 40, 50 years old, and just like an airplane, they continue to do stuff on time, and they rebuild stuff and that sort of stuff. But about 15 years ago, maybe even a little longer than that, this company went through a huge building phase where they built a whole bunch of 4200s in Louisiana, and they were basically all the same, and they're what you normally see when you see us on our regular tug. And then after that, they started building some 3000s in Chesapeake, and then after that they started building 4200s again, but they started building them in a Florida shipyard, and they made a couple little differences. So I thought it'd be fun to make a video showing excuse me, how I feel about the difference between the newer tugs and the older tugs, or the Louisiana tugs versus the Florida tugs. So one of the first things that you can notice about this is that if you notice, I can't even touch the ceiling. It's a very high ceiling in here. And on our boat, we've got a very low ceiling. So that's kind of cool. The 3000s normally have a very high ceiling as well, but the 4200s had shorter ceilings, and that's kind of cool. I kind of like that. You also have the latest electronics. Our electronics are probably about, I shouldn't say our electronics, they get changed out all the time, but they're of a package that was probably 15 years old. I think our tug is 13 or 15 years old. And in the industry, a 13-year-old tug is basically brand new. But this boat is probably only a few years old, and you can see that many of the things have changed on the dash. Instead of having steering selector stations, we have these electronic ones, and but there are some things that have different, and I thought I'd share with you. Here's one thing that's different. We have different controls. They're still electric. Our controls are electric as well, and these are nice. They feel really good, and they're, because it's a newer boat, they're quicker in and quicker out. The shaft brakes work very quickly on them. The only problem is that the difference between being forward, neutral, and reverse is very close on these, where ours have the big levers so you can really feel them. So I've noticed that, excuse me, suffering a cold here. I've noticed that there are some times where I think I'm in neutral, but I'm still in reverse, or vice versa. When I do this, Luke has control of them upstairs because he's doing this job right now, so I'm not messing him up. Another thing that isn't the end of the world, and it's really kind of personal preference, but this is the rudder angle indicator, what we might call an RAI, rudder angle indicator. And basically he's got the rudder hard over to starboard right now, and that kind of makes sense. I don't like this style. I like the style that's 180 degrees different. So in other words, this would be turned around this way, it'd still be green on this side and red on this side, but the rudder, the lever would indicate where the rudder is. If you notice, our rudders don't turn this way the way this does. Our rudders turn the exactly opposite of this. So not the end of the world, just a personal preference thing that personally I don't really like that much. That's just something that's something, and it's like I say, it's not the end of the world. It's really easy to get used to, and that's not that big a deal. But there are some other things. We don't have the nice wood that we have in our boat. We believe they called it Spanish cedar. I think that was what our boat was done in. But this boat does have some things that are pretty fancy. I can show you some of them on the inside while they're still maneuvering outside. You come down here where we have some wooden doors. All these have a wood veneer, but they're all steel doors for the fire compliance. See, these are granite countertops throughout the heads. See, here's my room. I just moved in because I'm only here for a couple days until I get back on my boat. But it's set up exactly the same, but with darker woods and big ugly hardware, which I'm having a hard time with this because I don't like the hardware, but I do think it's probably better hardware than the hardware that we have, where ours looks nice, but I think that's probably a better function, a form of a function. But when we come down here to the galley, you can see we have a big granite countertop here, and personally, my feeling with granite countertops, look, there's granite all through here. Looks beautiful, right? Well, I would rather seen that money that went into granite in my paycheck, but that's just me speaking. But it's a tugboat, and when we're offshore and things are rough, your coffee cup's gonna break when it falls onto here. Your plates are gonna break. Everything's gonna break. And then when you go in the shower and you take a shower, because we always have the air conditioning on, all of the beautiful granite surfaces are all wet from condensation. So that's just me. But anyway, set up exactly the same way as our boat, but like I say, these are more veneer, where ours are a little bit more real. But that's that. And then let me show you some other differences that I found.
A few moments later.
You know, as I walk up here, there's one thing that we haven't talked about that's probably the biggest difference of them all, and that's that the 4200s that were the Louisiana boats had inward turning wheels and were in quart nozzles. These have open wheels, so there are no quart nozzles, and they have outboard turning wheels, which is a decision I don't really understand the thought process there. And I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm just saying that I'm not the guy that builds the tugs, but I would have thought that they would have had inboard turning open wheels, but they have outboard turning open wheels and no quart nozzles. So what that means is that if I do a twist on our boat, things will start to really shake, and if I hook it up like this, the whole thing, you see all this cavitation. This boat hardly cavitates at all. You can go hard over, hooked up and hard over, and it doesn't vibrate or anything, but it also doesn't really move that much. And I think a lot of that has to do with the propeller design and the fact that it's not in a quart nozzle. So in other words, when we come to stop, we can stop a loaded barge much quicker on our boat than you can on these open wheel boats. And that's just a function of having quart nozzles. So our boat, it's funny, I don't miss the rattling and the shaking and the popping, but boy do I miss the power. So it's funny, they always say, oh, it's about 10 or 20% difference. Man, it feels like a ton, like just coming out of the notch. I'll put the engines up to half to back out, light tug, And on our boat, I'll be doing 4 or 5 knots in reverse. This boat's doing like 1 knot before it builds up any speed. And it's amazing. But anyway, just different things. All right, let me bring you out here. The rest of the boat is pretty much the same as everything as the ones that you've seen, except that it's a much newer boat. Now here's another thing that, once again, I didn't build these, so this is just my own personal preference, but this is the doghouse. And what I really don't like about this, and personally I think it has to do with the guy that's in charge of the whole all the builds for this company. I don't think that he was a wire guy. I don't know that. I could be way out of my league talking this way, but I got the feeling that he looked over here and saw that putting the doghouse in the middle made it more symmetrical, and you could look over here. And that's good. Whereas on our boat, we would have our doghouse right here. Now, putting your doghouse right here, we can still see the winch. We don't see anything over there. But look, we can look all the way down the side of the tug over here. So having the doghouse on one side gives us one good side and one bad side. Having the doghouse in the middle gives us 2 bad sides. I can't look down if I'm closing on the buoy or if I'm pointing. And once again, this is something that you would only know if you were a wire guy. When you're getting on the wire, you want to look down the side of the boat and steady up on a buoy. All I can look down and see is the back of the boat when it's in the middle. So that's something that I don't really miss. Or, I should say I don't envy that our boat is like that. I'm really glad that our boat has one good side and one bad side. And the bad side, it's something that we can still work with. We still round up on that side when we have to. But this boat has both sides are bad. Does that make sense? Looks like Luke is still waiting to try to get some line handlers. Thank God he took over for me, because that's an awful, awful, awful job. There's another difference, and these winches are run by a big diesel engine. The 4200s that were built in Louisiana have a great big 6-cylinder John Deere engine, and it runs a hydraulic pump that has a big, huge chain that runs this whole winch. Well, they did the same thing with this, and it's the same winch up here. But one thing they did that was different was that they put a 4-cylinder engine in, and it still has a lot of strength. But I've heard, and I have not witnessed this myself. I'm only saying what I hear from the other guys. When you're towing with it, sometimes the strength of the engine, when you're pulling on the wire and you're trying to let wire out, the engine, it's kind of like going down and using your, like a Jake brake. You're using the engine to keep the speed of the wire slow. Well, apparently these trip out all the time. That's what I've heard. And you can't, like with ours, our engine is so overpowered by the winch. If our wire was tied to the bottom, we could pull our whole tugboat right underwater. It's so powerful. I don't think that's the case with these. Anyway, that's just that. What other things? I told you about the wheels. I told you about the rudder angle indicator. Those are pretty. Oh, you know what? There's one other thing that's really silly. But remember, it's little silly things that make us feel home or not. Our handrails are painted. Of course, this has been painted for a couple of years. Ours have been painted probably 14 or 15 times. Every year it gets painted, and the handrails get messed up, and that. But they have some sort of, I don't know if it's powder coating or it's probably powder coating, but I don't know. Somebody thought it was a shrink wrap, but I really think it's a powder coating. But they have these going up here, and it sounds silly, but these make such a big difference than the paint that's on here, because when you come down, your hands, you're holding onto the air, your hands get black from the soot that comes off of the exhaust. Sounds silly, but that's that. But anyway, just a quick video between new tugboats and old tug. Oh, you know what? Another thing is that when I'm hooked up at 100% load, each of my engines has a fuel rate on it, on the displays do, and they say that we're burning about 120 gallons per engine per hour. And when I was in a hard twist with this, I looked and one was at 103 and the other was 105 gallons per hour, which I think is indicative of a Tier 4 engine versus a Tier 2 engine, and it's much more efficient. And you say, well, that doesn't seem like much. No, man, that's like 15 or 20% more efficient, so that's pretty cool. But anyway, that's that, and I think that's about it. Other than that, everything else is really cool. So this is your old buddy Tim. Thank you so much for watching. I'll try to get some more stuff out to you. When we get back to our tugboat, I'll be able to have the easy, we have Starlink on our boat, so it's much easier to upload things. I have to upload this on my cell phone on my data plan, and so that's kind of tough. And hopefully when we get back to our boat, everything will be cool and we'll get back to normal. But I wanted to get something out to you guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. And if you get a chance, check out SV Paquita. I'll put a link in the description below. And you guys, thank you so much. Take care, be safe, and as always, I'll see you on the water.